when you were designing the Inferno, did you think at all that maybe this is going to be too hard?
It was kind of what we set out to do. So, no, I don't think I ever thought it was going to be too hard because we did set out to create the biggest, the hardest challenge in the game, right?
Hmm.
It was meant to be the aspirational goal that players will try and achieve to get the ultimate cape, right?
Yep.
And very much trying to mimic the spirit of what the fire cape was at launch as well, right? Maybe that wasn't so extreme even at launch, but the fire cape for everybody, every new player, is that kind of immediate aspirational challenge. Oh my god, how am I going to beat Jad? It feels ridiculous now because Jad seems so trivial to everybody,
Not
but we all
everybody,
kind of
but
remember
yeah.
that experience, right?
Hmm.
Right, we all remember how, like, sort of getting Jad hands and
Oh
being
yeah.
scared and then misclicking a prayer or whatever. It took me. I remember doing Jad myself in like back in 2007, and it took me 8 attempts at the fight caves. I think I made it to Jad every time.
Oh.
Died multiple times because it's just none of us were as strong. I didn't even use F keys to switch tabs. Like I
Oh.
didn't even know it was a thing. So you're doing all this, and obviously it's scary. You're like panicking. You don't dare to want to take your mouse away from your protection prayers. And I can almost remember specifically like the first 3 runs. I didn't even make it to healers, and then I got one where I got past healers but forgot to drink a prayer pot. And if you remember, there wasn't a nice convenient orb at the top of your screen telling you had to switch to the skills tab to see what your prayer points were at,
Yep.
which obviously ridiculous. That
Rough
was
days.
difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
So, but then eventually I did it, and it was like the most amazing feeling to finally get that satisfaction and have that done. It's behind you. You basically never need to do it again. You've got a fire cave, and
Yeah.
you can show that off. And as we grew up, we obviously a lot of people got very confident at Jad. It no longer was the big scary threat it was. And when I joined Jagex, it was one of the first things I pitched. I remember my first day. So my first day was meant to be the Monday, and but before I joined, the old school team was due to do an off-site meeting. So obviously back then we are not working remote; everyone's on site in the office. But when we needed a big meeting, like an all-day meeting, or we wanted to get out of the usual work environment to do deeper things, bigger conversations, we'd often book like a conference room elsewhere outside the office. And that's what old school were doing the Friday, the literally like sort of the day before I was meant to join, and so they still invited me along, despite the fact I wasn't quite part of the team yet. And so that was my first ever day of Jagex, was actually in a meeting room in a hotel in Cambridge, and we spent the whole day talking about plans for old school. We were all just sharing ideas, things we think should be in the schedule. And obviously, the team was quite small, so everyone could have a seat at the table and discuss these things. And the 2 things I brought to the table that I really, really wanted to do was Fight Caves 2, which obviously didn't quite have the name of the Inferno yet,
Hmm.
and Monkey Madness 2 was the other thing I was really, really keen to do. And obviously, the pitch for Fight Caves 2 was very much let's create that aspirational goal. Let's create that. Let's create that. And obviously, everyone was quite on board with it. We didn't do it that quickly. I joined in 2015. It took until 2017 for us to finally get round to it. But obviously, it came around, and I got the project and went on to create it. But it took me a while to sort of think of the idea. But the ideas that were with me initially was the Zuck idea, what Zuck does with the sort of moving shield. So
Hmm.
at first, my pitch wasn't a moving shield in the lava. It was actually that like Zuck would be on land, potentially, not actually behind the wall. And then there'd be this sort of moving turtle creature, like a hardened shell of lava, and that would be the moving shield. And it'd walk left to right across the environment, and it'd basically be the same thing. You moved behind the shield, but I was thinking you would run out to melee the boss and then run back behind the shield. That obviously
Mm.
changed, and I think the what we did later and what we did now was a lot simpler. It was a lot easier to execute it. It made more sense than the fact there's this random turtle creature that why is it there? What's it doing? Um, but like the idea just were iterated from there. Um, that ultimately, this is the sort of mechanic we've never done before. Really, it's not like a 3D game where you know the walls and scenery kind of block projectiles and gunfire or whatever it is. It's weird for old school to work in up that kind of way. So it's a bit of a hack to really pull it off. But obviously, the idea being if you're behind the shield, then well, he can't throw a projectile at you. It's going to hit the shield. The
That
next step was like, what if the shield dies, right? Like it does damage to the shield. So
yeah.
like these sort of ideas started to come together and into what obviously was the ultimate result. And then it was like, what if Jad spawns?
Yeah,
you
that,
know?
that that's the question I have. Like, where did that come from? Like, let's spawn a Jad while you're dealing with this, because at the time that was insanity to do that.
So it really was. And I remember sitting in a meeting with I don't know if you remember Mod Ronan,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
was the first community manager on Old School, and Mod Alfred, who
Mm.
was the first artist on Old School. So Alfie must have been there when we were doing Chambers as Eric. I can't remember. But I sat in a meeting room, I was like, this is my idea. And I was drawing an awful sketch on the whiteboard with like big, awfully drawn circles and pictures of Chad. And I was like, right, okay, so the boss is going to be here. It's going to throw projectiles at you. But if you hide behind this moving shield, the shield will block them. But then various other creatures that you've already fought on the ways will spawn. But instead of attacking you, they will attack the shield. And you will have to attack them to pull them off the shield. And the thinking from that, the inspiration was just healers from Jad. It's the same sort of thing. Healers come in, they target Jad. You've got to target the healers to pull them off Jad and distract them. And the same sort of concept, right? These
Hmm.
creatures spawn and attack the shield. You attack them to distract them. So it is all inspired by the fact it was this kind of sequel. And I thought that was cool. And then it'll all right. You're not going to be able to just you could sit there and prey flick them, right? Potentially, but I realize you're probably going to have to kill them. Because it's going to be probably quite a long fight. You're probably not going to have to sit there and prey flick them. You've already got a lot to deal with. But ultimately, testing it, I thought that was too easy. Actually, you know what? I'm trying to remember the story exactly how it came up. No, the Jad was earlier because the Jad was in that meeting with Ronan and Alfie. So I think it maybe was more of a concept or an idea that I wasn't sure yet. But I remembered I said to them, but then what if Jad spawns and attacks the shield? And I remember Ronan and Alfie being like, "What the fuck?" Because this obviously sounds absurd. People already at this point, it was already people thinking this is so hard,
Yep.
this is so brutal,
Yep.
and but yeah, obviously it was the development where I spent probably the Inferno development. 3/4 of it would have been the Zuck fight alone, and me playtesting it and iterating it and tweaking the numbers. I spent so long trying to balance that so it was right. But ultimately, I felt it needed the Jad. It needed that moment of to spice it up.
Yep.
And the healers only come along late on as well. So I was finding it too easy. Now, bear in mind, I'm playtesting it by spawning in at the final wave, right? So
Yeah.
like you have none of the same pressure that players actually have when they do it for real.
Hmm.
I'm just spawning at the final wave with a T-bow and playtesting it,
And
just trying to get a sense of how it feels.
and you know what's coming up. Like, you literally designed it, so you know exactly what's coming. Oh, for the first few people that were doing Inferno, they have no idea what is about to happen.
Yeah, they had no clue.
Yeah.
Um, no, yeah, obviously I knew that after somebody gets into half health, Jad's gonna spawn, and then when some people get into low
You
health,
were
the
so
healers
excited
will
for that, I
spawn.
bet.
Oh, it was so good. But the healers I thought were the perfect final ingredient. That
Yeah.
they throw everything you've just done up in the air. Suddenly, where you were standing is no longer safe. Suddenly, you're taking loads of chip damage and you're panicking because your health's going down. Like, it really does mess with you to what you'd done perfectly, probably up to that point. So, it just kept having one more thing to deal with. And as I say, like, it comes back to that basic boss design principle. I want things to escalate. Things should feel like they're stepping up and stepping up. And so Jad is one element of that, but also then the healers are the sort of last hurrah of, the last ditch. fuck you maneuver,
Yeah,
basically.
literally. What about
But
triple jads? What was the? Did you think triple jads might have been pushing things a little bit too far? I mean, imagine if Ronan was in that
no,
room, he'd be like,
no.
no, 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 don't do that.
People thought it was crazy at first,
Yeah.
but it honestly become because so I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but RuneScape had already done a Fight Cave sequel,
Okay.
called the Fight Kiln, and always often you get the benefit of hindsight, right?
Hmm.
We can look at that and see what worked, what didn't work, and so on. One element was I thought their final boss didn't live up to what Jad was. The final boss felt really underwhelming. It wasn't that the way it was easy to beat the kiln. I felt the waves were actually quite difficult, but the final boss wasn't harder than the waves. It didn't feel like a culmination. But the second one is they did a double Jad. Now, the problem with it is they had this power up system going on. Like every wave, you could pick up a crystal from the floor, and these crystals give you really strong power ups. And all you had to do was save one of the power ups, and you could just basically negate that whole wave by making
Hmm.
yourself immune for so long. And so no one really ever actually got to properly deal with two jets. There was also a safe spot in the room, so like you could utilize this piece of scenery in the middle and block one of the jets off. So you just didn't have to actually fight two jets at once. The threat of it was there. The idea of it was scary, but in reality, it was quite easy to deal with. I wanted people to deal with double jets properly, so I ended with a Jad and then a double Jad and then the final boss. And also, I didn't have healers on these Jads
Mm.
because I thought you're already dealing with two Jads. It definitely doesn't need healers as well. But then I was beating it first time, and I'm not trying to big up my own skills. I know my skills are nowhere near what the players are. I've not beaten Inferno myself, for example.
Mm.
Um, I feel like I probably could if I give it the effort, but
That's
I
actually
just
crazy to
genuinely
hear.
haven't.
I would have expected you to do it by now.
I feel like I could. I've just kind of probably just put it off of the effort I know it's going to take to learn the waves because I
Yeah,
know
yeah,
it's the
yeah.
waves that will take me time, and so I just haven't ever really fancied doing that grind. I don't know why.
That's fair. That's
Maybe I should at some point because it would
yeah.
be nice to do.
Yeah.
But like yeah, like, essentially demonstrates the point, right? Like I did two Jads first go.
Hmm.
It wasn't that hard. First point is obviously I off ticked them intentionally when I spawned them because I thought that's the fair thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be harsh if they both spawned in and you had to instantly like walk under one of them to or run away from one of them to off tick it. So I off ticked them intentionally. And I think that's the bit that made it quite easy because actually got quite a lot of time, right? Jad's attacks quite slowly, so the fact you can just quickly swap your prayers to each of them, no issue at all. And it was too easy. So I added in healers, and I still thought it was too easy, and that's why I went to three. Um, and I still thought three was quite manageable, and I had no issue dealing with three myself, and not many people in the team exactly had issue with it.
And it was three with healers.
But three with healers,
Okay.
yeah, and but I still knew that I can't push it much further. It's not the final boss.
Yeah, yeah.
There's another boss to come after it, which is obviously much more insane. And I also know that in reality, you've just done 68 waves,
Yeah.
or however many it is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like you've done maybe 2 hours of waves, and so dealing with three Jads where one mistake's gonna hurt you, because these Jads, I think their max hit's higher than the regular Jad. Um, your odds of dying if you mess up are higher than before. So I didn't feel I could push it much further. Three was good, and obviously we've added the challenges since. You could go and do six Jads and stuff in game to see maybe if we'd pushed it further, what it'd be like. Um, but it didn't need pushing further, so I thought that's good. And people obviously when on launch, it was one of the most amazing experiences of my time at Jagex. That those first few days watching people do attempts where you had 10 it must have been it must have been sometimes it was 20k plus viewers in people's streams, I think,
Yeah.
and people would just jump from one stream to another because obviously the attempts take so long. All the viewers would be on whoever's in the furthest, basically.
Yep.
Whoever's most likely to get to the boss. And I didn't sleep that night on the launch day. Like I remember I sat in bed, I had my TV in front of my bed on, watching Wook's stream at 3 a.m. I think this is when the "what is Yad doing here"
Yep.
moment
Yep.
happened, and obviously that was amazing to watch that. But no one beat it. No one beat it the first night. No one beat it the second day. And that weekend, I was flying to America on holiday
Wow.
with friends. So we were flying from Manchester in the northwest of England. Obviously, I was living in Cambridge, so I think it was the Friday night I drove up to Manchester, hung out with my friends that night, and then the Saturday morning we were due to go to the airport to fly to Boston. And it was that morning, and I was watching it on my phone on Twitch on the Twitch app where Wix finally beat it, and so I did get to see it, and I was very grateful that it didn't happen while I was on the flight or something
Yeah.
like that. But it was a genuinely surreal experience. Just how much the whole community was sort of united around watching these Inferno attempts, and it kind of showed the value to me, and like not many people could beat Inferno or even wanted to give it a go at launch because it was so
Yeah.
hard, but it still managed to sort of engage and get so many people excited, despite the fact they weren't even playing it. Um, and obviously, I think now you really see the other side of it is it's maintained that aspirational challenge. Obviously, there's a lot more people who've beaten it now, but it's seen as that achievement to really go for and get. So I'm very proud of obviously what happened with Inferno and everything that's come since it. The reaction to it and everything was amazing.
I wonder how you and the team kind of felt about, the wider community not even wanting to do it. Because I remember watching, I mean, I was there, I was in college, and I was watching, it's just like stream hopping, watching these people do their attempts and stuff. And I remember telling myself, like, I will never step into this piece of content. This is just stupid. Like, this is just ridiculously too hard. Like, the fact that Wooks can't get it in a day, like, there's no way I'm even going to step in here. It's just not worth it, not worth the time. And I'm imagining vast majority of the community felt the exact same way I felt. Did you guys kind of,
Yeah.
obviously you guys didn't know exactly how the community felt. I mean, obviously on Twitch it was just popping off, but did you feel like maybe at any point did you feel like maybe this should be toned down, or were you very confident that like, no, this needs to remain as is? And I think there were like minor tweaks made and everything just to make things a little bit more. I
Yeah.
think like the major used to like off tick if it healed something and little things like that. But did you
Yeah,
ever
there might be a few little nitpicky issues.
were you guys concerned that maybe this wasn't going to be as popular, or was that just not really something you guys
I mean,
cared about?
because we set out to create what we created,
Hmm.
we were fairly happy. Like, but it's always a risk. Like, it's always something we need to think about because at a business level, you can almost think we just spent however long I spent on it. It was only like 3 months, if that I spent on it
Wow.
as the project, and that was all the other stuff as well, like the obsidian fishing stuff,
Oh yeah, yeah.
the new pickpocketing, the obby armor, and those sort of things, and the little town sort of surrounding it. I did as well, but ultimately, it's 3 months of development time. Is it right for us to prioritize 3 months of development time onto a project that like only like 10 people beat in the first week? Is that right? And so like that's a question we do have to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
But like the value of it showed itself, I think, over time.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think we knew that that should be the case, but it's definitely a long burner, right? It wasn't going to be the sort of release that goes out and all of a sudden memberships flooding high and everyone's coming back to old school. It didn't really do that. We obviously might want that in a big project, but it did other things. And so when it comes to even thinking about the roadmap now, it's the sort of thing we're thinking about. That when we release an aspirational piece of content like that, realistically, it's not going to be the sort of thing loads of people flock onto the game and play. But it will engage people, it will excite people about the game, and they will think, one day I can get to that piece of content, perhaps.
Yeah.
Maybe they won't know it immediately, but one day they might. And that's important because the whole game is about progression, right? You spend 99% of your time on old school growing your character, whether it's leveling your skills, completing quests, gaining new equipment, gaining enough gold to buy better equipment, whatever it is, it's all about progression. I'd say the game is all about the journey. I mean, it sounds cliche, right? It's not the destination, it's the journey. But
Yeah.
with old school, it really is that. If you compare it to other MMOs, World of Warcraft is not about the journey; it's about the destination. And that's not a bad thing necessarily. It's just a different game, and that World of Warcraft want you to be endgame. You can fast track your progress. And it's all about the raids, right? They add dungeons, raids, and that's the top tier content. And they want most people to be endgame so that more people can play those pieces of content. But old school doesn't work like that. Instead, we set out to like embrace that journey. The progression system is what makes the game satisfying. So, if you want to if you want to get to Elf City, Prifddinas, and beat Song of the Elves, you have to do all these other quests. You have to get all these other requirements. You have to get enough equipment and combat stats so that you can beat the bosses. Getting 70 in those skills feels satisfying because of what you get for doing that. You can
Yep.
get access to the quest, you get access to a whole new city, you get access to new content, then you do the gauntlet, then to me, that's the bread and butter of RuneScape. So things like the Inferno existing as goals, as places to get to, the idea of getting to the Inferno and one day beating it is itself important to how this game works. Not even just playing the content and beating it, which is it's good in its own right. But having stuff like that for people to aim for one day is important because it motivates you to progress your character.